Our phones shoot in 4K, and editing software costs less than a conference registration half the time.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Higher Ed Pulse, your no-fluff guide to artificial intelligence in higher ed. I'm Mallory Wilsey, bringing nearly 20 years of edtech and marketing expertise straight to your earbuds. Higher ed leaders are expected to master AI overnight, but let's be real, no one has time to sift through every headline, hot take, or research report. That's why every Monday I'll break down what actually matters, fast, clear, and to the point. Want to sound like the smartest person in the room at your next team meeting? You're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Higher Ed Pulse. On today's episode, video. Prospective students spend more time watching than reading, but most campus teams still treat video like a production line item instead of an actual strategy. Today, we get tactical about where video earns its spot in your marketing mix. I'm joined by Phil DiMartino and Marisa Uluski from 5 Tool Productions, a Boston-based video and event production company whose higher ed work spans Emmanuel College, Syracuse University, and Tufts. Phil co-founded 5 Tool in 2016 after starting out in sports radio, moving into live streaming before most of the audience had a smartphone, and working inside higher ed. Marisa produces, shoots, and edits while also running 5 Tools marketing. If you saw any of the media content out of Let's Go Upstate last May and thought that the production looked sharp, these two are the reason. Phil and Marisa, welcome to the Pulse.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thanks
Hi.
for having us.
Oh my, that was so enthusiastic. Thank you. I am so glad. Like, the gang's back together. I have been looking forward to recording this with you guys since May, but now we're like squarely in the middle of summer, and I know I've had vacation brain for sure this month of August. I have to imagine y'all have been doing some really great, well, I know Marisa has been. Marisa, where have you been lately?
I have been in and out of the Cape lately. A lot of Cape trips. My family has a house down there, so we've been coming and going, trying to do some like fun New England weekends.
And what have you been doing on the Cape?
I was engaged on the
Yes, she has.
That was fun. That was totally out of the blue. I didn't know that was coming. So that was really fun. But yeah, so that made an extra special Cape weekend.
Nothing as exciting as getting engaged for me, but
Yeah.
a lot of travel with young kids, which is less vacation than it is a trip. But it's always fun, and a lot of beach time, a lot of pool time, and yeah, a lot of fun. It's been great.
Oh, nice.
What about you?
And
Where have you been? Where have you been off to?
I too have been to the Cape this summer, Montreal for a milestone birthday. Yes, you only turned 21 once. Yep. And yeah, just, like honestly, and you guys have been to Saratoga for Let's Go Upstate. It is such a great summer town. It's actually like hard to go on vacation in the summer when you live here. I tend to put my vacations into the winter months so I can pretend I'm snowbirding, but yeah.
I love it.
And Phil, I love that you showed up wearing the Upstate hat.
I'm repping. This is great because I'm a hat collector, which is, I'm not ashamed of it, but it is a vice. I do have a lot of hats, and I don't. This is the first of this specific color scheme for sure in the collection.
It's a good
so
one.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. It's a great hat, and great event. So yeah, glad the band is back together, like you said.
The hat looks really good on video. And hey, what a great segue into our topic today. Every higher ed marketing plan out there says video matters. Oh my gosh, you guys, my very first conference presentation was in 2009 on video. Okay. So like, I deeply believe that video matters in a recruiting and alumni engagement strategy. But when you look at the budget and the org chart, even like the story doesn't really back up those beliefs for most institutions. EAB had a survey of more than 22,000 students and found that YouTube and Instagram are the top social platforms for Gen Z, meaning students form their first impression of your institution through video, often before they ever read a single sentence that you very carefully crafted for your homepage. The bar just keeps rising. Students are comparing your content to the creators they're following on TikTok, and they are not grading on a curve just because you are in college or a university. Yeah, a lot of campuses, video is what happens after the strategy gets set. Someone just takes B-roll at commencement and then like says, oh, well, we should do something with this. Or a videographer role just sits vacant for 8 months. Meanwhile, our phones shoot in 4K and editing software costs less than a conference registration half the time. So, right, AI can like actually promise to generate the whole thing from a single prompt in some cases. The tools, y'all, have never been cheaper, but there is a lot of expertise and talent that needs to go into this. And that is why I'm so excited Phil and Marisa are here, because they are truly two of the best. And y'all, like, you two see behind the curtain at a lot of organizations, colleges, nonprofits, corporate. Phil, when a new higher ed client calls you, what's the problem that they say they have? And then what's the problem that they actually have?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I do think that a lot of times people just, especially in higher ed, call up and they'll say, oh, we need a video. And it's super, it's super vague and it's super undirected. Now, the people who know what they want, obviously, and know what they need, I think are some of our favorite to work with. And we definitely have some clients who come in and, a lot of times it's most straightforward if it's in admissions marketing where it's, we need, to help with yield. We need to get more people to apply, right? Like that's the most straightforward one. And in that case, I think it is sometimes a little more direct, but even in that case, it can be a little muddy because, well, what does that mean exactly? And what does that mean for a video? So I know for our purposes, when we first engage with a client, whether it's someone we've worked with a lot or someone we're working with for the first time, we treat everything from the perspective of the boat, the budget, objective, audience, and timeline. We want to know how much do you have to spend, what are you trying to accomplish, who is it for, and when does it need to be done? And I think that a lot of times that like very simple conversation really leads to, the real conversation about what you're actually trying to accomplish. And I think starting from the standpoint of, well, first of all, does this need to be a video? And I think from our standpoint as a video and events company, that can be a tough conversation to have because obviously you want people to work with you. But ultimately, it's like it's important because if you work with someone who thinks they need a video, but in reality, they need a podcast or an event or a photo shoot or whatever it is, and you create a video, they're not going to be happy with it. So, yeah, I think that's really how we try to approach it because sometimes people know what they want. Like you said, sometimes people think they know what they want. But that conversation initially for us is often super revealing. And you might want something that, the B of that budget, objective, audience, and timeline won't allow you to have. And so I do think that that's the most informative part of the process for us. And it happens before, you ever write a script or anything like that.
It's enlightening for us, but it's also enlightening for them too when you have that conversation with a client and they don't realize, we'll kind of ask some of the questions that they haven't thought about yet or things that go into it that they're like, oh, actually, good point. So I feel like, it's kind of an enlightening conversation for everyone to be like, all right, what do we actually need out of this and what makes sense?
And we do a lot of work with fundraising shops as well as like admissions marketing and things like that. And sometimes it'll be around, a giving day or a giving Tuesday or something like that. And it is helpful to work with people, multiple times because you do get to see what does well and what doesn't do well. So, if the goal in that case is we want to raise a lot of money on that specific day, well, how do we do that? And sometimes it's putting students in front of the camera. Sometimes it's, more direct appeals to specific, subsections of the audience as opposed to just one. It's very rarely let's make one big video for one big audience and see what happens. And I know that's a huge component of what we evangelize here too. So anyway, I don't know if that's a direct answer to your question, but it's a roundabout way of saying everybody needs something a little bit different. And there's, a video for every budget and a budget for every video.
Well, let's stay on the topic of budget. I love boat, by the way. I haven't used that before.
One of my former colleagues made it up at BU. When I worked at BU, one of my former colleagues made that up, and she's the best. So I'm can't
stealing it.
Credit, but yes, you should. Yeah. It's good. It's a very helpful framework too.
It is. I actually have a meeting on Wednesday afternoon that I'm looking forward to pulling that one out during. So thank you. Thank you for that. And I also want to say thank you for the reminder that the goal comes first and the tool comes second. And in this case, the video is the tool. And so the fact that you are approaching every new client with those kind of strategy-led questions to really ultimately get at like, what's the point of what we're doing here is just like, that's what I want in a partner like y'all. And gosh, and that's probably why we partner together. So Love that. But let's stay on budget because the marketing mix is big and there's a lot of different things that go into it. And the CMO, especially at this point, right? Like the budget is fixed now for this upcoming fiscal year. Video has to fight against things like paid media, their website, different events that they are running, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So help the CMO make the case for why video should be on the list and what it can do that maybe some of those other channels and tools cannot.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you approach it intelligently, it actually can be a good use of budget, and I do think people have a perspective that it's really expensive. And it can be, right? There's tools and there's expertise and there's times involved in it. But I do think that it actually can be a pretty cost-effective way to scale, reaching your audience compared to print mailers or events or a lot of other things that also everything's expensive, right? The biggest thing is that if you spend money on it without a plan, it's going to feel like wasted money. And I do think that is why sometimes people have the perspective of video being expensive, because I think a lot of times people do come in with that idea of we need to make a video, and then maybe they'll drop a lot of money on a big brand video that's going to go on the website, and maybe it'll get distributed on social or something like that, but it's not really made for social, and it really works better as like a commercial at halftime of a football game than it does as content to actually directly engage with people. And that might be a case where you feel like you spent more than you should have. But when you do it right, I do think that you can get really personal, good stories from video that you can't get from other medium. And I think that focusing on students and on, faculty members and researchers and the people who are doing great things at a university or a college, focusing on those people and telling their stories and putting it in a format that can directly get in front of prospective students. And in the case of fundraising in front of prospective donors, I think that you can make a connection there and tell a story, more effectively and more succinctly than you can through any other medium. Then it's just about planning to make sure that you're stretching what you can do, and I know that's a huge part of what you focus on too when we work with higher ed clients.
Yeah, and I think it's part of it. Obviously as part of both the audience trying to meet people where they are. You're talking about print mailers. A lot of students are going to be more so on social media than like really paying attention to what they're getting in the mail. So it's kind of about, thinking about what format you're sending these things in. Is it for social? Is it for, emails to donors, things like that? But a lot of it's about meeting, your audience where they are so that you can use that budget most effectively to make video that actually makes a difference.
And to that point, when we work with someone and, we want to know up front, is this going to be on Reels? Are you going to try to create content for TikTok? And because you can't just take your brand video and then just make it vertical, right? And that makes it a video for Instagram. That's not a video for Instagram. That's a video for YouTube that, or for a different medium that you then used to just put on Instagram. Whereas what kids are consuming on TikTok or on, what people are consuming on Reels, it's a totally different style of content. It's shot differently. How people are presenting themselves is different. So it can't just be an afterthought too. And I think that where it's going to go dictates how much you're going to get out of it too, and planning for that appropriately.
So you said that not having a plan is a pretty common way that maybe institutions are wasting money on video, but are there other ways too? Yeah,
I mean, I do think like I worked in higher ed myself, and I saw, definitely sometimes, you go to conferences and you see how people have engaged on some of these bigger brand videos, and there's nothing wrong with them. A lot of times they're beautiful and they're great and they're awesome. But I do think that idea of like one shoot for one big video at a really high budget is kind of a tough sell. And I think that the smarter approach typically really is to try to go at it from the standpoint of like, what can we, we're going to do this shoot to reach these people. What can we try to get out of this? Right. And I do think that not being efficient with a video shoot and a video project is probably the primary way that I see people not getting as much out of this as they should. And I can give an example. You mentioned Emmanuel. We work with Emmanuel here, and I think here in Boston, and we worked with them for years on a variety of different projects, but one of them is kind of around brand awareness and around their campaign to put out their slogan to the world, basically. And there is an anchor video to that. But as part of that project, when we were shooting it, we also interviewed individual students to tell their stories. And it led to, a full year campaign of videos that were all kind of collected as part of that one shoot and thoughtfully up front to say, we want to tell stories in these different areas. So when you're out there shooting, which is like the most intensive budget point of a shoot, it's like, what are we going to get that's going to support this to have legs beyond this one anchor video and really, get us good content that's going to get in front of prospective students for a long time? That's the right approach. That's the way to make sure that you're not wasting your time and your energy, because like I said, the biggest point at which, you're going to spend money is when you get the crew out there with the gear and the lights and everything else, but also work with a team that's going to understand what that needs to be to make sure you don't overspend on that part too.
Yeah, we preach a lot, one shoot, multiple pieces of content. And that's either, you can go into it planning for that, which is great. But sometimes it comes out like when you're shooting, you realize, wait a minute, this can exist in different ways. We've gone back to clients before and said, actually, this interview subject talked a lot about this one specific program or something that doesn't necessarily fit into this video, but it could exist as its own content. And I think it could do really well and help you here. So it's kind of, a good thing to plan for if you want to like kind of trickle out a campaign of videos and do like one anchor video with multiple other student stories or something like that. Then there's also things that come up as you go and you learn as you go and say, oh, actually, this could work really well as a social clip, or this could work really well as like this specific targeted video for this specific audience.
And if you've got a really good editor, she will do that when she's in the editing minds there, going through the hours of footage you sometimes have. She might say, wow, this doesn't fit in here at all, but this is a great clip specifically for Instagram if we format it the right way. So yeah, there's efficiency, I think, and being efficient is the number one way. Like, people are not efficient enough. And it's hard because it takes time to think about what you want, what you need, and plan for it. So like, I get why it happens, but that would make the video budgets go a lot further if everybody tried to be a little more efficient.
I think it even happened with us too when we were working on Let's Go Upstate. It was kind of, we talked about some of the reels that we maybe wanted to create ahead of time. Then once we got the interviews with everyone, I'm like, ooh, a lot of people talk about the value of networking at this event, and we hadn't planned for that, but it kind of came up naturally, and like, we should make a video about this. So that's a perfect example that's super relevant to this conversation, that, we've seen it happen.
I was going to bring that up too, Marisa, because it was like in real time, like you could see like your brain working at the event of like, okay, like touch base. It's Monday afternoon. I've just had 4 conversations. They all said this thing. We need to pivot to this thing. Like, your ability to kind of like pivot in real time and kind of follow the lead of what you were hearing and seeing on the ground. I think like that is a skill set. So kudos to you on that. But like, if somebody doesn't have a team like you, what's your tip? Like, how did you develop that skill, Marisa?
That's a good question. I think it's mostly, sit as an editor, you sit and you watch a lot of content all the time. And so I think it's part of, when you think about how much work you put into the actual shooting of things too. We sit somebody down for maybe an hour interview, 45-minute interview, and you know that the goal is to get it into a short social clip or a 2 to 3 minute video. It's almost like I see all the work that went into, like, we have so many questions, so much that's left on the cutting room floor. So how do you think about using it? It's almost like, I want to make everyone's time worth it. So let's find another way to use this content. And I think that's kind of, seeing that over and over again is how you kind of develop that eye and that ear for that. And like, okay. And when you get closer with a client and you kind of understand what they're going for, or what kind of content they might need. And it's really helpful if you have a good relationship with them to be like, hey, are you open to trying something like this? Mm-hmm. Like, we have found something that, could be a different avenue of video. And, having those good partnerships is usually like, oh yeah, that like we should try that. So I think just watching a lot of that content and kind of having a lot of those interactions will help you do that over and over again.
And I mean, it's not always possible, but if you can be a part of the planning process, the shooting process, and the editing, you go from knowing, or at least get read in on the planning before you go on a shoot. I know what they're trying to accomplish. Okay, I know what we captured, and this wasn't necessarily exactly part of the plan, but I think that this would be useful. But it also makes a huge difference in the interview process of like, oh, this is something worth following up on, and that's a tangent that's never gonna be useful, right? And there are times when interviews go on for an hour, and you're like, oh man, that was a waste of time. But there's plenty of times when it goes on for an hour and you're like, wow, there's a lot of really, really good stuff there that could be useful, just not necessarily for this project. So yeah, I think it's also just knowing, again, it all goes back to objective and audience. And we've done a lot of content for, commencements like you mentioned, or things like a move-in weekend. And for a move-in weekend, at one point we did like, we used a 360 camera and we did like a ride-along style video. So we like hooked it up to a moving cart and we had the students just like go away with it. And it was like a totally different kind of approach than just like a standard highlight reel. And we got like a lot of nonsense, but we got a lot of really, really fun stuff. And, you know, if I'm a prospective student, it's like, oh, that's a little bit, I can get the vibe of what it is, right? Of like what you're actually going to get when you talk to these students. So I think it's being flexible too and adjusting in real time with the idea of what the objective in the audience is at all times.
So if you were looking at footage, like what might be a marker that this footage is going to be reusable, something I can repurpose and like extend the shelf life of this particular thing for, you know, far longer than maybe just the event itself, versus like, okay, like I'm looking at this and it clearly has markers of being more disposable footage. Like, I don't know, is there any kind of like checklist there that a listener could take away?
Definitely at the top of the list is things that are specific to date. When you talk like in an interview about something that really dates it or like really makes it sit in a certain time, and often we'll be like, actually, can you say that in a more general way? That's kind of how you get that evergreen content, is not trying to date it as much as possible, and then that way you can reuse it down the line, and it's not so significant for that one specific period of time.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of work at events, and I think event capture can be tricky because it's like if you're set up, with the event as the backdrop, then, it's obviously tied to a specific event. Whereas if you're set up in a studio setting or on, a plain color backdrop or in a lab, right, or something like that, it could have taken place at any time. So like the setting of a shoot is really important. Obviously, like this isn't as relevant now, but, everything we shot for colleges and universities from 2020 through 2022 was completely dated by masks, right?
Yeah.
So like, that's obviously not as much of a concern now, but the backdrop where you capture things, I think like that's something we think about a lot. If you are going to capture at an event, a lot of times we'll be at, a big trade show and there'll be tons of people walking by in the background. It's a super dynamic way to capture the content. It gets you into the excitement and hustle bustle of the event. But if you want to use it for anything else, it's like it's totally stamped to that content and that event. And then I think like when we're when you're interviewing, like it's all about like the greater mission of the school or the client or whatever it is. And when you hear someone kind of hit those key words about, what the mission is of that organization, it's almost like you file it away. And again, if you work with someone over and over again, it's like there's always going to be a use for people other than people who are paid to saying nice things about, your organization that tie in with your mission statement. So, we always listen for those kind of key things that are like, that is what the founder of that company or what the VP of that college said to us that is important to them. And someone who doesn't get paid to say it said it. That's when we like mark it down and we're like, cut that and use it for everything.
That's a great tip.
Yeah. Right.
I think I want to revisit the point about interviewing at events too. I think that, usually if we're doing interviews at events, if we're doing a highlight reel or something like that, it's also about, let's ask specific questions about this event happening now. But while we have you, let's also ask questions that are going to be relevant for the event's mission or the organization's mission, things like that. So even though it kind of has the same backdrop physically of like you can see that it's at an event, the content itself can be used in a different way because you're not specifically talking about that event. Maybe you're talking about the kind of the more mission driven things around that event as well.
Yeah, we do. I know we're talking too much, but we have coffee and that's what we do. We do a lot of work for like membership organizations and their events. So you just did one out in Colorado, and we do some locally here. And a lot of times it's, yes, we want an event highlight reel, but it's the stuff that's going to be really useful for them to like boost memberships throughout the course of the year is like the value of being a member in this organization, obviously. So it's if you can get those interviews to be done in a way where it's not totally time stamped to June of 2026, and you can ask some questions about the mission of the organization and like the type of work that these people do and how it's beneficial to be part of this organization. That's the type of stuff where it's usually like, oh, there's extra use for this beyond, what we've scoped for, and it's really, really good and spot on to what we want. And it's the added benefit of like, there's a couple thousand people here who we can draw from, where we don't normally have access to these people in a high quality setting. So events are a great place to get this stuff. You just have to be thoughtful about how you get it.
Yeah. And I'm thinking too, like you've both made the point a few times that the more you bring your videographer or video team into conversations as early as possible, like the more equipped that interviewer is going to be to know those right questions to ask when you've got your subject in front of you. So really smart. All right, rapid fire practical round now, because a lot of listeners are operating in like 2 or 3 person, Marcom shops. And like, sadly, they don't have a full-time videographer on campus, or maybe anybody with any trained, right, video skills. So I'm going to fire a few questions, and I want you each to answer. And just to make it easier, Marisa, you go first. Phil, you go second. So what is one piece of gear worth buying this year that costs less than $500?
I think that you made the point about how we all have phones, we can capture video, but I think good audio is really hard to come by. So little, people do the tiny mics, things like that, but we have a DJI mic that you can plug into a camera, or you can plug it into your phone. It's super easy to use, and it captures great audio. So I think that, the video is easy enough to work around if you have a camera, if you have a phone, but kind of finding a mic that it works really well with both of those things and can be, adjustable to your situation is good.
Can I do two?
Amen. I mean, we break the rules here all the time. So yes.
So to go along with Marissa's, get a very cheap phone tripod, right? To go with your phone, because great audio and stabilized video, or like, that's, if you can get those things as like your user generated stuff, it's going to be way better. So the simple little phone tripod you can get on Amazon, don't have to spend a lot of money, just something to keep it still, because no matter how steady handed you are, you're not going to hold it still.
You can get it with a ring light too.
Get it with a ring light too. Also true. But my real answer is, I mentioned a 360 camera earlier in this conversation. This is probably pushing the $500 budget, depending on which model you get. But Insta360 makes a 360 camera. It can do some really, really fun stuff. There's a little bit of a learning curve once you want to use the footage. But if you've got some time and resources, or any staff or interns or anything like that, you can capture some really, really great stuff with that. And I highly recommend. It's also just a lot of fun. But yeah.
Cool. All right. What is the thing that our phones already do that most people underuse?
I think that a lot of the times when you're recording video or even photos on your phone, you can change the settings to make the quality higher. So I think a lot of people, it takes some digging to figure out how to do that and to change some settings, but you can record 4K video on your iPhone. So I think that as long as you know where to look in your settings to do it, I think that's kind of an easy win.
I have this might be niche, but I have an Android Pixel specific, and I think there's a similar thing, in every single phone, but like, in your camera, like in the video settings of the camera, like for the Pixel, it's specifically called like the pan function. So what that does is it captures like a slow motion, stabilized, like cinematic style video. And it's like, you can use that B-roll. If you use it for B-roll, because it doesn't capture sound, you can use that as supporting footage, like in a professional shoot. It captures it in 4K. It's like smooth, it's beautiful. And like, my wife has the same phone as me, and I was like on vacation shooting it, and she's like, "Oh, what's that?" I was like, "We have the same phone. Like, how do you like?" So like, she has had this phone for years and didn't know that. So I do think like it's not as simple as just like press the video button and capture. There are ways to make it better. And like, specifically, if you have a Google Pixel, go over and use pan, turn your phone sideways, capture some B-roll, or if you're shooting a vertical video, keep it vertical, and it's beautiful, awesome, great footage that you can use.
Great. All right. What's an editing habit that will take someone's amateur footage and make it look more professional instantly?
I think the add-ons, kind of the, the graphics, the transitions, the B-roll, things to kind of dress up the video. I think a lot of, amateur content, which is also, there's a time and a place for, is a lot of like jump cuts or things that are, just one camera, things like that. So if you have some nice B-roll to put over your footage and cover some of those jump cuts, or have some nice graphics to kind of dress things up, I think that'll help take your video to the next level.
Yeah, it's all good. You stole mine a little bit with B-roll, but I do think like people, like if you have a simple edit, and by simple I mean like a couple of cuts and nothing insane, you can do it in Canva. You can do it in like Premiere Rush. A lot of schools have free Adobe accounts. If you work at a school, so like if you haven't tapped into that, like it's a huge benefit that you should be using, because it's the basics of video editing. Some of it can be simple, especially like I mentioned with tools like Canva. It's pretty straightforward. But B-roll is the biggest one, and by B-roll I just mean supporting footage. And if you talk to a student, if you're interviewing a student for a video you're going to put on your Instagram or something, like take the extra 5 or 10 minutes to get some shots of them doing things relevant to what they talked about in the interview. So like if they are again in a lab, get a couple of shots of them, with a beaker or in front of a computer, and use that to cover the points in the interview where they jump. Now, all of that said, it all depends on like the medium, and TikTok, like jump cuts and tiny mics are fine.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to do something a little more elevated, then yeah, you want to cover those jumps with B-roll. And it's not as hard to capture B-roll as you think.
Last rapid fire question. What is the shot everybody gets wrong?
Wrong is a hard word. I feel like it's, there's a time and a place for most things. I think that it's just about preference of your video. Some people like more direct to camera video if you're, doing scripted lines, something like that, off camera interview shots, things like that. So I don't know that I necessarily have one shot that I would say is wrong. I think there are some, it might feel wrong for the tone of your video or, kind of not exactly what you want. Like if you want somebody speaking directly to a donor, direct to camera might be your best bet because that feels like you're speaking directly to the person. So I think that, I don't know that I'd use the word wrong.
Yeah,
but.
mission dependent,
Yeah.
Right? I think that like anyone who wants to be shooting video on their own should just like take 5 minutes to learn about the rule of thirds, which if you like ever did anything with photography or video, and like most phone cameras have a little grid you can turn on, the rule of thirds grid. So whether you're taking photos or video, it's like if you can line people up, at the intersection of those grids, you're going to get a lot more right shots that like just feel right to the user. And again, I do think direct to camera versus off camera is one of the biggest things. So like if you're making, doing a thank you video to a specific donor, like direct to camera, hi Mallory, thank you so much, I really appreciate it, versus like students talking about their experience in a lab, like an off camera focus is a little bit different. But rule of thirds, I would say if you're going to shoot anything, like spend 5 minutes, watch a YouTube video about rule of thirds and like how to do it, and your shots are like immediately going to feel better. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Phenomenal. Well, hey, it's not a Pulse episode if I don't mention AI at least once. And, like AI is having an impact on video right now. Like half the audience is probably being told they're not going to need a team like yours in 2 years, which is not true for the record. But, and I remember last Christmas, like downloaded Sora and annoyed my entire family with the amount of like dog videos I was creating. And I mean, I turned my uncle into the Grinch. Like it was like, I had like the best Christmas day ever playing around with that app. Now, am I going to post it on, an official feed anywhere? Probably not. But like video is being impacted by AI. I want your thoughts. I want to know where it can genuinely help in a video workflow right now. Like there's tools like Descript, which are fantastic. But like also where's the line? So it's like 8 questions in one, but you guys are great. So
yeah. You want me to go first? Well, I'm going to start with where's the line, because I think that's like the most important groundwork of it. I think that it's just important to know like what the public sentiment is about AI. And like, I think that largely like fully generative AI, like I don't think people want it right now. Maybe some point they will, but like when I say that, I mean like full scratch, like I put in a prompt and said, make this video. I don't think people want that. I think people have an aversion to it. I think there's a lot of blowback to it. So like, I would definitely say that like you should avoid that. Now that said, there's a lot of ways that AI fits into our workflow now in our processes. And I think from a planning standpoint, it's a really good starting point ideation tool. It's things like, helping come up with thoughtful interview questions, before you go in and do an interview. It's helping come up with ideas for interesting shots, right? Like the AI does have access to the full breadth of all the world's knowledge, and to not tap into it to get ideas, I think would be a disservice, right? So the trap people fall into though is when they're like, write me a 2-minute script, and then they don't, then they just use it, right? So I think it's a really good tool for production ideation, as long as you put human eyes who know the project and the client and the goals on it and say, let me take this information and apply it. So I think at the beginning of the workflow, it's there, but there's a ton that happen throughout the workflow as well.
Yeah, I think in, using the AI tools that are kind of already integrated into the editing software we use is where I use it the most. A lot of audio cleanup.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned doing like interviews at events and things like that, or even if you're in a room with a noisy air vent or something, it's helpful to clean up audio. Yeah, we probably have it right now. It's helpful to be able to use those AI tools to strip out background noise, strip out music in the background that you don't want there, kind of make audio more clear. I think that's a big one. And even at an event that I did for a higher ed client recently, we did, they wanted some like voice of God voiceovers to introduce people to the stage. We did those all as, AI voiceovers. And, some people have feelings about that, but I think, if it's done right and well and in the right amount, I think it can work. And I think that we got positive feedback from it. So, that's kind of a nice, easy, way to use it as well. And it depends on people's budgets. And that's kind of, the cheaper way to do it than hiring a voiceover artist, but there's a time and a place for both. So I think kind of using those tools a little bit to kind of dress some things up as well.
The AI voiceover, I mean, like, it also, again, though, it needs a human touch. Marisa built those as walk-up introductions, and you had to go in and phonetically make sure they were all correct.
Pronunciations are hard, and so trying to make sure that works.
And we've all watched the videos on Instagram or whatever that have the AI voiceover, and like the cadence is just wrong, and like the intonation is wrong. So it's like you can't do it for like long pieces, but there's a place for it, and there's also a real place for talented, real humans to do voiceover work too. So it's totally dependent on budget. I will say the audio cleanup tools are unbelievable, Mallory. I'm sure you use some of this, doing podcasts all the time. You can make a lot more out of subpar audio than you could 5, 10, 20 years ago. And it's something you should definitely use, especially if you're recording on your phone.
Yes. Amazing. All right. I've got one final question for both of you, and you're not allowed to say the same thing. So I'm just setting the ground rules. Let's say we've got a CMO listening who has $10,000 in their budget for a video this year. Well, we don't know all their goals or their strategies or anything like that. All right. So I understand the answer is it depends. But video-wise, where would you steer their boat? See what I did there?
Hey.
Very nice.
There's a reason we get along, Mallory. You want to go first? Where are you steering the boat? You want me to go first?
You steer the boat, and I think I'm going to jump on your boat.
Okay. I think I would direct the CMO to reframe their thinking to go from a video to what can I do with video, right? Which is to say, yes, could you make one video and maybe it would be good? Sure. I would go back to that example we gave about like the branding campaign, which is like, yes, there's an anchor video, but there's going to be some offshoots of it. I would say, think about a way you can make kind of a campaign out of this. And my answer of what should that be might be dependent, but I would say something where you are, using students and faculty to highlight the really, really great things about the mission of your institution, whether that's, whatever your priority is right now, if it's research, if it's, student life, like get on the ground and don't tell people like doing and experiencing the positive things you try to tell people about all the time, and show it, as much authentically through their eyes as much as possible. So I would say don't try to do a video, try to use video to tell the authentic stories of people like living your mission, because they are there, unless you have totally misaligned your mission, which is a totally different question. Then you shouldn't make video at all, and you should start over.
And you should stop listening to this podcast and go fix that. Yeah.
I think mine is it's related, but it's a separate answer, I promise. So I think that a good way to do that, and what we've done a lot with students specifically, is kind of the media day style shoot and format, where it's kind of you plan, you be as efficient as possible with your shooting time, and you bring in, students, faculty, whatever it might be, and have multiple stations of content of, you sit people down for interviews at one station, you do a photo shoot at another station, you do some hero poses at another station, something like that, where it's kind of, using your time to get the most content possible and get everybody in there as quickly as possible, I think is a good way to sort of accomplish what you're talking about. But it's kind of a separate thought of, we think of media days as like the sports media days, where you kind of do some more of that like fun, flashy content, but you could also do it in a very different way and have it be more meaningful conversations and things like that. And we've done it both ways. But it's kind of thinking about how can you use your shoot day and get a lot done within that shoot day. And then you then create content from there.
Yeah. And I mean, not our whole team, a lot of us came from sports media, and that sports media day, it exists for a reason. It's a way to get, all 25, 30 athletes on a roster through a whole bunch of content in a distinct period of time. And I think it's underutilized in, the higher ed setting. So we try to use it for things like giving days and special events, but also just, it's a really good way to like, this is the day we're going to get a lot done in one day, and try to minimize, the burden of that budget of shooting and really consolidate it, as opposed to, going back to a location to get 30 minutes of scripted lines with one person, in one day, and then go back another day. Let's get it all done in one day and really be as efficient as possible.
Amazing. Well, y'all, this time it just flew right by. I had very high expectations for this conversation. I feel like we exceeded those expectations. Like, this was great. I feel like a listener is going to walk away really with, like, tomorrow morning they can just do some things differently, regardless of whether or not they have the budget to hire a team like yours. So thank you for so many little nuggets of information. But I would like to give you the opportunity to plug 5tool, because you've generously donated your time to this podcast. And, like, you guys are great. I could say as a client, like, incredible to work with. But please, where can listeners find you?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. And sorry we talk so much.
Yeah.
We're very long.
Please. It's a podcast. That's the point.
People can find us everywhere. They can find us at 5toolproductions.com, the number 5toolproductions.com. We're on Instagram primarily as our kind of primary public facing social, among other places. And we're always trying to keep up to date on our site of kind of sharing the stories of work that we do with clients that we think is really exciting. So there's a lot of case studies on there and stuff as well. And we always just like, talking to people too. So if you've got the conversations we like best, well, maybe Marisa doesn't like them as much, but the conversations I like best are when people come to me like, wouldn't it be cool if, and then we figure out how to do that if. So like, we really like when people come to us and they've got kind of like a weird event or a weird video and they want to try to figure out how to make it happen. And we're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's figure out how to make it happen.
We've done some fun stuff with mascots that you would think of. So,
a lot of mascots.
We'll be creative.
Yeah.
We'll all run to the website to hopefully uncover some case studies or footage about the mascot work. Thank you guys so much. I can't wait, Phil, to see you again in September in Saratoga. Marisa, congrats again on your engagement. What an exciting summer it's been. Oh my goodness. Y'all, this was wonderful. And listeners, we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Pulse. The show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.